the day I was diagnosed with early-stage ductal carcinoma in situ. I called Erick 32 times on video. Roma, I'm busy. Can you stop already? The moment he hung up, Diana posted a status update. Commemorating weaning day. Thank goodness for Uncle Erick being there. The photo showed her 2-year-old son biting his own nipple, while Erick held her and the child in his arms. Erick replied under the post, a pampered rose grows up. But Uncle Erick will always be here. I put down the CT scan from my prenatal checkup and gently touched my belly, then silently signed the consent form for a total mastectomy. After surgery, I suffered a threatened miscarriage. The first thing I did after stepping off the operating table was to send my application for studying abroad. Chapter 1. When Erick came home, I was reading the response to my application in my email. He was on the phone with someone, smiling faintly. The next moment, he caught a whiff of the chicken soup and furrowed his brows slightly. His gaze fell on me, and for a brief moment, a flicker of surprise crossed his face. You're not at work today? I put down the spoon. No, I had surgery. Erick gave a perfunctory nod, clearly not paying attention to my words. On the other end of the line, someone said something, and Erick patiently explained. Nothing important, just some trivial stuff. So this is what I had become after 7 years of marriage, trivial stuff. It wasn't until much later, after he hung up the phone, that his eyes finally landed on me. He walked toward me with a takeout box in hand. Diana's son weaned today. She specifically packed you a slice of cake. He handed it to me as if it were a favor. The cake inside the box was already a mess, the mangoes smeared together with the cream. I turned and walked to the bedroom. Erick grabbed my wrist, his voice tinged with irritation. All this fuss just because I didn't go to the hospital with you today? Suddenly, he seemed to touch something. His expression changed, and he released my hand as if it was burning. I looked down. It was the scar I got years ago when I saved him. 7 years had passed, and that scar no longer hurt, though it itches from time to time. Erick coughed awkwardly and softened his tone. Come on, eat something. You've always liked sweets, haven't you? I pulled down my sleeve, hiding the long scar on my wrist. I looked straight at Erick's face. I'm allergic to mangoes. A hint of embarrassment flickered across Erick's face. I'll take you to that restaurant you've always liked. He reached out to take my hand as he spoke. Before I could respond, Erick froze. He picked up a stack of papers from the coffee table. It was the surgical documents I hadn't had time to put away. He picked up the paper and murmured, "Total mastectomy." He glanced at it, stunned at first, and then a look of sudden understanding appeared on his face. He sneered. No wonder you kept calling me this morning. Roma, you forged a surgery report just to make me stay with you? He flung the report in my face. Diana's celebrating weaning day. Nurturing life is a noble thing. Why are you trying to imitate her? Pathetic. I took the surgery report from my face and was about to explain. I didn't. He interrupted impatiently. I'm Diana's uncle. She's the rose I personally raised. Stop targeting her. His words left me frozen. Erick assumed my silence means guilt. I took a deep breath and asked the question that had been buried in my heart for so long. Erick, is Diana's son yours? The moment my words landed, there was a loud crash. The chicken soup pot on the coffee table was overturned with a single swipe of his hand. He looked at me with utter disgust. Roma, you are absolutely revolting. Shards of porcelain scattered everywhere, cutting into my foot as I stumbled to the ground. The black chicken head in the soup stared back at me with half-closed eyes, mocking me like a clown. For the first time, a flicker of panic flashed in Erick's eyes. He was about to reach out to help me when an incongruous ringtone interrupted him. It was Diana's personalized ringtone. A flash of embarrassment crossed his face as he turned to answer the call. When he hung up, his expression was filled with unease. Something urgent came up at the office. I have to go. As he turned to leave, I grabbed his sleeve. Erick turned back to look at me. I forced a weak smile. Can you not go? Please don't leave. Erick, if you stay, I'll believe you. I'll believe you're just Diana's uncle, that you only see her as a junior. Our eyes met. He avoided my hand. You know I'm busy. His patience ran out as he pried my fingers off one by one. In the struggle, something fell from Erick's shirt pocket. I glanced at it and immediately let go. Erick seemed surprised by my sudden change in attitude. His tone softening. I'll be back before midnight. I promise. I struggled to stand, leaning on the floor for support, and pointed at the lace underwear lying on the ground, the one that wasn't mine, with a bitter smile. Then remember to take that back to the office too. Chapter 2. The clock ticked on, the hour and minute hands slowly overlapping, pointing to 12. I laughed at myself for holding on to even a shred of hope. Erick never kept his promises. Dragging my bleeding foot, I hailed a cab to the hospital, while waiting for my wound to be bandaged. I inadvertently saw a post Diana had made 2 hours earlier. Clearly it's 998 roses, but Uncle insists it's 999. Erick commented, because you are the most beautiful rose I've ever raised myself. I silently turned off my phone. I thought I'd feel bitterness, but all I felt was numbness. The nurse dressing my wound happened to be the same one who cared for me during my surgery last time. After bandaging my foot, she supported me, the genuine concern in her eyes far exceeding anything I'd seen from Erick. Where's your husband? You just had surgery. Lost the baby. Is he really that busy? I thought for a moment, then nodded. Yes. The next second, the door burst open with a loud bang. She got pricked by a rose thorn. Somebody, come and take care of it. Erick barged in, holding Diana in his arms. I looked at the nearly healed wound on her hand. At first, I froze. Then I laughed, pointing at him. I joked with the young nurse. See? I told you he's very busy. Erick's expression soured when he saw me. Roma, I said I'd come home, and I will. Why are you being so despicable? Following me here? I opened my mouth to respond, but Diana suddenly let out a soft gasp, struggling out of Erick's arms. Uncle, Roma just wants you to care about her too, she said, biting her lip. Why don't you take care of her instead? Erick gently tapped Diana's nose with an indulgent smile. No way. You've been fainting at the sight of blood since you were a kid. The normally stoic Erick pulled out a piece of milk candy from nowhere and handed it to Diana with a smile. You call me uncle, so I'll take care of you for the rest of my life. I couldn't help but laugh aloud. Attentive? He couldn't even remember that he just injured my foot. Careless? Yet he could recall Diana's childhood habits perfectly. The young nurse beside me couldn't hold back any longer. Supporting me, she blurted out, the patient needs post-surgery care. Before she could finish, Erick dragged her over to bandage Diana instead. I sneered, limping toward the door. On the way out, I didn't hesitate this time. I picked up my phone and hit confirm on my study abroad acceptance letter. Chapter 3. When Erick returned home in the middle of the night, I had already turned off the lights. The pain from the surgery always felt worse at night. A faint scent of roses filled the air as Erick leaned down over me. I frowned and turned my head away. He chuckled softly, leaning close to my ear. Roma, Diana's son is adorable. I want us to have a baby of our own too. Let's try again. He removed his clothes, his fingers brushing against me as he pulled at mine. I stayed motionless. The next moment, he froze. His hand had touched the layer of gauze on my chest. There was a moment of silence before he laughed bitterly in anger. He grabbed a pillow and threw it onto the floor. Roma, are you brainless? You cut off your breast just to show off because I took a weaning commemorative photo with Diana? He grabbed my wrist tightly. Fine. Anyway, you haven't been able to have kids all these years. Keeping it would have been useless. He slammed the door on his way out, leaving me in tears, my pillow soaked. Over the years, I'd struggled to get pregnant due to polycystic ovary syndrome. I had been undergoing IVF, and yesterday's hospital visit was supposed to be for a prenatal checkup. Instead, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I felt like I had failed my child. Enduring the pain, I got out of bed, unlocked my phone, and purchased a plot in the best cemetery I could find. The next morning, Erick, surprisingly, was still at home. 2 breakfasts were laid out on the table. I glanced at them but turned around and left. Since I had decided to study abroad, I needed to wrap up my projects quickly. Not getting the reaction he expected, Erick sat coldly at the table. Roma, for some reason, he hesitated. He pointed to a bouquet of roses beside him, his tone indifferent. These are for you, I replied calmly. I don't like roses, The petals were already starting to blacken. I looked directly at him and said coldly, "And I dislike second-hand roses even more." For a second, I wasn't sure what he saw, but a look of realization crossed his face. "So that's why you've been throwing tantrums these past few days. The company has a team-building event, and you want to come along too." I frowned, unable to figure out what he was talking about. He gestured toward my suitcase in the corner. "Your suitcase is already packed." "All right, do me a favor, and I'll take you. Design a dress for Diana. Her son's birthday party is tomorrow night. Diana wants to wear a dress you made." I stayed silent, and just as he was about to try convincing me further, I nodded slightly. "Fine." My uncharacteristic compliance caught Erick off guard for a moment. Then he pulled my hand toward him. "Roma, if you'd figured this out sooner, things would have been much better. I'm Diana's uncle. Taking care of her is my responsibility." I subtly avoided his touch and smiled faintly. "Yes, the rose you've personally cultivated deserves the very best." This comment seemed to please Erick. He pulled out his phone and tried to transfer money to me in front of my face. The spinning error icon was incredibly ironic. Message failed to send. He deleted me as a contact on the day he took the weaning photo with Diana. Awkwardness flickered across his face. In a panic, he took out his wallet, pulled out a wad of cash, and handed it to me. But in his haste, a photo fell out from a hidden compartment. The picture showed Diana and her child, looking blissfully happy, with Erick smiling gently at them. I picked up the photo and handed it back to him, speaking calmly, "No need. Consider it my wedding gift to you both." Chapter 4. The next day, just as I was leaving the cemetery, I received a text from Erick. "See you at 7:30. Attached was the location of the restaurant I had always wanted to try. The cemetery happened to be nearby. After a 10-minute drive and parking, I walked into the high-end private room in the back. Through the glass, I could see the intimate scene inside. Diana was holding her son, leaning into Erick's embrace, her eyes red. "Uncle, will there ever come a day when you grow distant from me?" Erick stroked Diana's hair, smiling indulgently. "You're the one I've raised myself. We're family." Diana's eyes reddened further, and her voice trembled. "But if Roma succeeds with IVF, once you have your own child, how could you still remember this family of ours?" Erick interrupted her. "Then I'll call Roma right now and tell her not to bother with IVF." He immediately pulled out his phone and dialed my number. Watching him, I felt dazed. The slip of paper in my hand with the cemetery address for the child was crumpled into a ball. Snapping back to reality, I felt my phone vibrate faintly in my pocket. I took a deep breath, pushed open the private room door, and smiled at the startled pair. "Were you looking for me?" Chapter 5. Diana was the first to recover, smiling as she took my hand. "Thank you, Roma, for making this dress for me. It's a bit loose, but I really like it." She paused, her face turning slightly red. "Uncle likes it too." My eyes fell on the clip at the back of Diana's dress. I had been working on that dress since starting my pregnancy preparations. I'd planned to wear it for a photo shoot with Erick once I got pregnant. Now it was nothing but waste. A perfect match for Diana, trash wearing trash. I walked straight to Erick and handed him the crumpled slip of paper. To my surprise, his lips curled into a sneer. He crushed the paper into a ball and threw it into the trash can. "If you have something to say, say it." Diana isn't an outsider. Just as I was about to speak, Diana suddenly threw herself into Erick's arms, pushing me aside. Her red-rimmed eyes locked on the white flower pinned to my chest, and she began to sob. The next second, a loud smack rang out. Erick stood with his hand raised. His voice was low but laced with anger. "Diana's son is turning 2 today. What are you doing, dressed like this?" He yanked the white flower off my chest and threw it to the ground, stomping on it until it was shredded to pieces. Then he gently shielded Diana's eyes with his hand. "So unlucky. Are you doing this on purpose to disgust people?" Supporting myself against the wall, I slowly stood up, shaking off the dizziness from his slap. The next moment, the restaurant's fire alarm blared harshly. Before I could react, Erick was already carrying Diana's son and dragging Diana out the door. He didn't spare me a glance the entire time. 5 minutes later, the alarm was deactivated. It had been a false alarm triggered by accident. I found Erick in the lobby on the first floor, standing amidst the crowd. A flicker of realization crossed his eyes. He probably thought I was worried about him getting hurt. Without a word, I pulled out a stack of papers from my bag and handed them to him. Sign these. Erick glanced briefly at the top sheet and sneered. A resignation letter? You're trying to threaten me by resigning? His glare was venomous. As you wish. With a cold smile, he signed each page, including the divorce agreement underneath. I turned to leave. Behind me, Erick's voice was full of fury. You just came here to make me sign this? I turned back calmly. What else? To stay for dinner? Erick's anger boiled over. Get lost. I immediately began looking up flights back to Haicheng. By the time Erick called me again, I was already at the airport waiting for my flight. I stared at his name on the screen before removing my SIM card and tossing it into the trash. Chapter 6. That same day, I returned home. Seeing my parents again felt like coming back to life. A week later, I was lying in bed, sipping the herbal medicine my mother had made for me. A message popped up. It was from my old high school classmates group chat. Class monitor, tomorrow night, Juno Hotel, class reunion. You can bring your partner. Since marrying Erick, I'd rarely kept in touch with my old classmates. I turned off my phone, deciding not to go. But the next evening, an unfamiliar number called. A familiar voice greeted me on the other end, making me frown slightly. Roma, it's been a week. You've had enough time to vent your temper. Come to the class reunion, and I'll forgive you. Erick was in Haicheng, too. Of course. I'd almost forgotten we were high school classmates, and this is how it all ended up. I hung up the phone and drove to the Juno Hotel. At the end of the hallway, I was about to push the door open when I heard voices inside. I'll bet 500,000 yuan that Roma, being so obsessed with Erick, will definitely follow his every word. With Roma's family background, being with Erick is already overreaching. Someone asked, Erick, how old is your child with Roma? Erick paused and replied coolly, I don't like children. Ha. A scoff came from the corner of the room. Only then did I notice the man sitting in the shadows. His slender fingers tapped rhythmically on the edge of the table. Sam? The last time I saw him was at my wedding, and I thought he had stayed abroad ever since. When did he come back? Sam stared directly at Erick. Don't like kids? Don't like being a father but love being the uncle? Chapter 7. Diana was Erick's Achilles heel. He wouldn't allow anyone to say anything bad about her. Sure enough, Erick's veins bulged in anger. The next second, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Erick turned to look at me. I gave Sam a slight nod as a greeting. For a brief moment, Sam's usually calm and indifferent gaze flickered with something, but he quickly suppressed it. Maybe it was my imagination, but I thought I saw the corners of Sam's mouth curl slightly. Erick adjusted his collar and, with a gentlemanly air, extended his hand toward me. Why are you so late? He sneered. See? If you'd behaved like this earlier, all that fuss wouldn't have been necessary. I ignored him entirely and calmly extended my hand. Erick was about to take it when I smiled gently, looking into his eyes. Then, using my thumb and forefinger, I forcefully slid the ring off his finger, before he could react. I spoke. Sorry. I left in a hurry the other day. This wedding ring, which I personally designed, should be returned to me. His finger was left with red marks where the ring had been. I didn't give him a chance to speak. I took off my own wedding ring and, without hesitation, threw both rings into the trash can. Expired. Spoiled things belong in the garbage. Erick's face twisted in embarrassment. Roma, could you really bear to leave me? I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my email and handed him my phone. A Dutch university acceptance letter? Ignoring his confusion, I walked past him and approached the man who had just placed a bet on me. Standing before him, I extended my hand calmly. I'm here. You don't need to pay Erick the 500,000 yuan. Just transfer it to me instead. After all, we're divorced now. From the corner of my eye, I saw Sam's mouth curve slightly into a faint smile. It hadn't left his face since earlier. It was just like high school. He still had that silly smile. I was about to turn and leave when Diana suddenly stormed in from outside. Before I could react, she grabbed a glass of red wine from the table and furiously moved to throw it at me. Roma, do you have no shame? You're divorced and still clinging to my uncle. But the sticky wetness I expected never came. When I opened my eyes, a tall figure was standing in front of me. In a calm yet commanding tone, Sam gripped Diana's wrist. Looking her up and down, Diana pouted, looking aggrieved, and whined. Uncle! Sam raised an eyebrow. So, you're the one Erick has been raising? I see. Not impressive. Red wine dripped from his hair and trailed down his jawline, leaving crimson streaks. Suddenly, I remembered how, back in high school, whenever Erick's admirers bullied me, Sam would always shield me like this. I patted his hand reassuringly and stepped out from behind him, reaching into my bag. I took out a set of keys and handed them to Diana. Here are Erick's house keys. Feel free to go there whenever you want. My voice was steady. I wish you both a lifetime of happiness. Before my words had fully settled, I grabbed Sam's arm and led him toward the door. The next moment, a loud crash echoed from the private room as a table was flipped over. Roma, you're unbelievable. Chapter 8. In the parking lot, Sam casually opened the door to his car. I'll take you home, he said. Sam leaned in to buckle my seatbelt, his warm breath tickling my neck. I sighed softly and closed my eyes. When I opened them again, the car was already parked outside my house, staring dreamily out the window. I said quietly, after all these years, you still remember where I live? He let out a bitter chuckle, murmuring to himself, I was afraid you'd get bullied. I walked you home every day. How could I forget? I froze in place as Sam got out to open the trunk. It's been a while since I came back to the country. These are for your parents. Box after box emerged from the trunk. Seeing my puzzled expression, he scratched his nose awkwardly. I glanced briefly at the contents: donkey hide gelatin, snow swallow nests. Letting out a light laugh, I said, my parents don't need blood-nourishing supplements. I suddenly leaned in close. Sam, this almost makes me think you came back to the country for me. Sam quickly put some distance between us. Don't flatter yourself. I've had some health issues and need to take time off to recover. I stared at him, unconvinced. With a resigned sigh, he began to explain. Your surgeon was a college classmate of mine. I wasn't trying to invade your privacy. I nodded. With Sam's supplements and my mom's herbal soups, I was feeling full of energy. It was perfect timing when a classmate messaged me, asking if I could do simultaneous interpretation for a foreign movie without Chinese subtitles. Following the address they provided, I arrived at an outdoor drive-in theater. Just as I was about to call to confirm, I heard the honk of a car behind me. A car rolled down its window, and there was Erick's face. The employer was Erick. Before I could turn away, he spoke. I signed a contract with your classmate. If you don't want them to pay a penalty fee, get in the car. When the movie started playing on the screen in front of us, I stood there, stunned, letting out a bitter laugh. I began translating every English line into Chinese for Erick. Suddenly, he hit the pause button. Out of nowhere, he said, Roma, no wonder you wanted to study abroad. It's your first time seeing this movie, yet you can translate it so well. When did your English get this good? I hadn't heard Erick praise me in a long time. I used to feel happy about it. Now, I couldn't care less. Looking at his face, I spoke calmly. Erick, the first time we met was at an English speech competition. Seeing his confused expression, I continued. My English didn't suddenly improve back then. If it weren't for staying to help you build your career, my dream was always to study further in Milan. He froze in place. I pointed at the screen. This movie isn't new to me, either. I've watched it 32 times. I've invited you 32 times. But every time you canceled on me because of Diana. I remember every line of this movie. I didn't want to keep entangling myself with him and moved to open the door to get out of the car. Erick grabbed my arm. Roma, why have you changed? My gaze was icy. Erick, who's really the one who's changed? Since Diana got divorced and came back, how many hours have you actually spent alone with me? Erick was silent, unable to say a word. Stop doing meaningless things. And, I added, frowning as I threw the bouquet of roses from the passenger seat at him. I don't like roses. I've never liked them, and you've never remembered. Chapter 9. Half a month later. I went to the hospital for a follow-up appointment. My recovery was going well. As I stepped into my home, I heard rustling noises. Just as I was about to call the police. "You're back." Eric's voice rang out. "I made a few dishes for you and your parents. Try them." Seeing that I didn't move, he looked a little unsure of himself. After a moment, as if remembering something, he pulled out a notebook and handed it to me. "Roma, we've been together for 7 years. Don't let a few small things separate us." The notebook was the one I used to record the moments we shared. But as time passed, it grew thinner, the entries fewer and fewer. "Roma, I know I forgot some things in the past, but I'm making up for it now." From behind him, he brought out a bouquet of jasmine flowers. "You don't like roses. You like jasmine." I swatted the jasmine aside, refusing to answer. "Eric, do you know the meaning of jasmine?" Eric froze as I pulled out a single jasmine flower. To send jasmine means to implore someone not to leave. "But now, I can't wait for you to leave." I threw the flower at him with force. "Eric, you're a coward. Doing things that cross the line with Diana, how hard is it to admit you cheated?" "I was just," he tried to explain, "treating Diana as a junior." "Yes, just normal concern between friends." He reached out to grab my hand, just as I was about to shake him off. The next moment, Eric was sent sprawling onto the ground by a figure. Sam stood in front of me, holding a file bag. Eric looked up angrily. "Sam?" Then he pointed at me. "No wonder you wanted a divorce. You two have been together all along." This time, I took a step forward. A loud slap rang out as Eric sat on the ground, his face full of disbelief. "You hit me for him? What's your relationship with him?" I smirked coldly and repeated the exact words he just said. "Just like you said, normal concern between friends." Sam interrupted me. "No, it's different." I didn't hear him clearly, so I asked again. Sam's expression was more serious than I had ever seen. He looked into my eyes. "My feelings for you are not normal concern. They are emotions I've harbored for a long time." The entire room fell silent with that one sentence. Before I could react, Eric had already charged at Sam. With one swift kick, Sam sent him sprawling onto the ground. He threw the file bag at Eric. "Eric, how can you even face her?" It was only then that I understood my medical records had been left in Sam's car. The records scattered across the floor. Eric, furious, picked them up one by one. As he looked at them, his face turned pale, and his body began to tremble. Chapter 10. Pregnancy report? "You were pregnant?" I spoke calmly. "It ended in biochemical pregnancy." Eric's eyes were bloodshot. "Why didn't you tell me? Where is the child?" I gave a cold laugh. "Didn't I give you the cemetery address the day before I left? You didn't even look at it. Forgot? Why didn't you tell me?" I coldly opened his social media account. 9 grid photos, one after another, all of him with Diana. Location tagged to the day of my mastectomy. I pointed at it. Eric took the phone, his angry expression turning to one of shock. The next second, he knelt down on the ground, mumbling to himself in despair. "The day you called me 32 times. Sam spoke beside me. She and the child were fighting for their lives. And you? What were you doing? You were with your cherished Rose." Hearing this, Eric stumbled out the door, his expression vacant. "Yes. What have I been doing?" Chapter 11. The next time I saw Eric was on my mother's phone. I was hiding under a beach umbrella, taking off my sunglasses. On the screen, a man was bowing with every step, struggling to climb a steep set of stone steps. Blood stained his forehead. It was Eric. I frowned. He had always been a non-believer. Looking at the surroundings, I paused in shock. Mount Johua. I had been there too, alone as well. At the top, at the Tree of Wishes, I had tied a red knot inscribed with both my name and Eric's. In the video recorded by onlookers, voices of discussion rose and fell. This young man is truly sincere. Indeed, over 3,000 steps. He started climbing at 5 in the morning. In the video, Eric was tightly clutching 2 talismans. I had prayed for those 2 talismans before, always believing that Eric kept his with him, until Diana told me, "Sister, That peace charm of yours, there's one just like it in our trash can at home. Maybe it was Uncle who threw it away. The discussions of the onlookers recording the video echoed. This young man is truly sincere. Indeed. Over 3,000 steps. He started climbing at 5 in the morning. The comments below rolled across the screen. One is a peace talisman, the other a death talisman, praying for peace for the deceased and blessings for the living. Looks like he's really obsessed. I felt a strange mix of emotions, and was just about to close the video. Suddenly, cheers erupted from the crowd on the screen. He made it to the top. I paused, stunned. The tree of wishes at the summit was still there. Erick was holding my diary, looking for something. He shouted without a care for appearances. Found it. I found the love knot. 2 red strings, worn with age, swayed loosely in the wind. Erick mumbled to himself, "If I tie it tighter, we can still be together." Just as he was untying it, a woman suddenly rushed out from the crowd, snatching the red string from Erick's hands. Without hesitation, she turned and threw my red string down the mountain, where it quickly disappeared in the wind. "Uncle, you've already divorced that woman. Why did you change the locks at home, and keep avoiding me?" "I had no choice but to come here and find you." She yanked at Erick. "I want to take you to see the master. You must be under a spell." Erick looked down at his empty hand, now only holding half of the love knot with his name on it. In that moment of stunned silence, he turned and slapped Diana across the face. "How dare you!" With that, Erick moved as if to throw himself down the mountain, only to be held back by the crowd. A woman nearby said loudly, "He worked so hard to find it, and she threw it away. What a lunatic." Diana raised her hand and slapped the woman who had spoken, but the other was unfazed. "I train in martial arts. Want to have a go?" With a slight effort, she grabbed Diana by the hair. Diana screamed, "Uncle! Uncle! Save me!" The woman eventually let go, pushing Diana in Erick's direction. Unexpectedly, Erick shifted slightly, causing Diana to fall flat on her back. "She calls you uncle, so your family. Take care of her." Suddenly, it was as if something snapped in Erick's mind. He kicked Diana hard. "Don't call me uncle." His voice was cold. "It's all because of you that Roma left." Diana sat on the ground, dazed. "Uncle, aren't we family?" Erick's eyes were icy. "Know your place. My family is only Roma and my deceased child." Chapter 12. Erick thought for a moment and dialed my number. I looked at the flashing number on the screen, took a deep breath, and pressed the answer button. "Roma, I know I was wrong. I've cut ties with Diana. Please, forgive me." He didn't give me a chance to respond, and continued, "I have something for you." Seeing that I wasn't answering, he quickly added, "Roma, haven't you always wanted to go to an island? I've already booked the soonest flight. I'll come to pick you up." At that moment, he suddenly paused. "Why do I hear the sound of waves on your side?" "Roma, where are you?" I raised my hand, gazing at the sky through my sunglasses, feeling the fresh sea breeze of the island. On the largest rock by the shore, there was silence on the other end for a moment. "I'm coming to find you right now." I laughed dismissively. "All right, I'll wait for you." Then I hung up. Before heading abroad to study, I finally had some time to take my parents on a trip. I didn't think much of Erick's call and went to the restaurant with my parents. However, early in the morning, a call from the police station woke me up. I arrived at the beach, still groggy from sleep. Several beams from flashlights were moving on the sand. Someone shouted, "Miss Roma is here now. You can come down." I walked closer, and a police officer grabbed onto me like I was a lifeline. "You're finally here." He's been here since noon and refused to come down even when the tide rose. He passed out from hypothermia in the evening, and a fisherman thought he was attempting suicide. He refused to come down with the rescue team. He insisted that we call you. The rescue team explained. Squinting, I looked ahead. For the first time, Erick looked this pathetic. In just a few days, he seemed to have aged, his eyes bloodshot. Seeing me, he instinctively reached out as if to grab my hand, but pulled it back. Exhaling, "Roma, I did as you said. I've been waiting on the largest rock for you." His voice trembled. "But now it's dark. And you didn't come. My phone ran out of battery, and I couldn't contact you. I was afraid you wouldn't find me, so I just stayed here. Luckily, you're here." He shoved both the peace talisman and the death talisman into my hands. Then, shivering, he pulled out a piece of paper. I took it. His voice quivered as he spoke. "Roma, there's really nothing between Diana and me. Look, this is the paternity test." I looked him in the eyes. "You don't need to explain, Erick." "I don't care." Erick froze in place. I spoke again. "How long did you wait?" Erick's eyes lit up for a moment, and he said happily, "I knew you still cared about me." "Not long, just half a day." His voice carried a hint of hope. I avoided his hand, which he had rubbed warm, and pulled my jacket tighter around me. Calmly, I said, "But Erick, I waited for a long time. Every time you stood me up for Diana, I waited with hopeful anticipation. I waited many days, many years." He seemed to realize what I was about to say, and began trembling. "Roma, please, don't say it." His voice was pleading. "I'm really tired." I spoke softly. "Erick, let it go." Turning away, I left. Erick remained standing on the beach, not knowing for how long. Back at the hotel, Sam pulled his anxious gaze away from the window. His face calm. "All sorted?" he asked. I answered, "Yes. Nothing to worry about." Sam let out a sigh of relief. Today was the last day of the trip, and it was time to say goodbye to Sam. "Sam, I'm leaving for abroad the day after tomorrow." "Thank you." "Goodbye." Sam's eyes were dim, unreadable. "All right. Until we meet again." Chapter 13. As soon as I got home, I received a call from the hospital. I stood at the door of the hospital room, seeing Erick's leg swollen like a zongzi. The same young nurse who had helped me before was changing his bandages. That day we parted. He had been absent-minded and was hit by a truck. I was just about to go in and say goodbye when I heard a voice from inside. "It hurts so much. Do you think Roma's surgery hurt like this too?" The young nurse looked at him, expressionless. "How could it?" Erick let out a sigh of relief. But in the next moment, the nurse spoke up again. She had a mastectomy and a dilation and curettage procedure. "It's 10 times more painful than yours." Erick froze, and then, like a child, suddenly burst into tears. In the next moment, I received several large bank transfers to my account. Sender, Erick. Message, best wishes. I boarded the plane, watching the clouds outside the window. A familiar voice came from the seat next to mine. "What a coincidence. You're here too." My eyes flashed with surprise, and then I teased, "Didn't you say you were unwell and needed to stay in the country to rest?" Sam smiled gently. "Love heals all ailments." A smile played on my lips. "I heard some rumors. They say you had a crush on me for many years in high school." Sam smiled slightly, his expression serious. "Let me clarify." He tightly held my hand, his voice firm and sincere. "The rumor is true.